I spent 8 exhausting years saving every dollar, sacrificing vacations, birthdays, even friendships, just to buy my dream home. The day I moved in, my parents smiled proudly, until I overheard them whispering that my sister's family would soon settle here too. At first, I thought I misheard, but then my sister posted online, calling it her new house. My parents said I was selfish for questioning them. Imagine building your life brick by brick, only to realize the people you trust most are plotting behind your back. I thought family meant love. I was wrong. When I first unlocked the front door to my new house, the key trembled in my hand. 8 years of sacrifice had finally condensed into this one moment. My own home. The smell of fresh paint, the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floor, the sunlight pouring through the windows. It all felt unreal. For once in my life, I believed I had built something no one could take from me. My parents insisted on throwing a housewarming party that very weekend. I agreed, eager to show them what I had accomplished, secretly hoping they might finally see me as enough. The party was buzzing with laughter. My mother carried a tray of lemon bars, the same dessert she made for every family occasion, while my father poured champagne with the air of a proud patriarch. My sister Amanda, her husband, and their 2 children arrived last. Amanda hugged me, congratulating me with words that felt rehearsed. "You've done well, Lena," she said, though her eyes darted past me, scanning the house like a realtor measuring square footage. As everyone gathered in the living room, my father raised his glass. "To Elena," he announced. "This house is not just a home for her, but for all of us, a symbol of family, of unity." Applause followed. I smiled politely, but a knot tightened in my stomach. For all of us? It was my name on the mortgage, my sweat, my sleepless nights. Yet in that moment, the house no longer felt entirely mine. Still, I told myself not to overthink. My parents had always been dramatic with words. After the toast, Amanda reached for the keys I had set on the counter. "They're heavier than I thought," she said with a laugh, but she didn't let go right away. Her fingers curled around the keyring, pressing into my palm longer than necessary. I forced a smile, trying not to pull back too quickly. That night, after everyone had left, I was cleaning up when I heard faint voices in the kitchen. My parents had returned to pick up a forgotten casserole dish. I froze when I caught their words through the thin wall. "The master bedroom will be perfect for Amanda and the kids," my mother whispered. "Yes," my father agreed. "And the backyard is ideal. They'll finally have space." My breath caught in my throat. The casserole dish slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The noise startled them, and when I stepped into the kitchen, their faces shifted into quick smiles. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" my mother asked. "I heard you," I said, my voice trembling. "You're planning for Amanda to live here?" They exchanged a look, then my father chuckled. "Oh, Elena, you misunderstood. We were only joking around." "Yes," my mother added, her tone syrupy sweet. "You're too sensitive, always assuming the worst. We're proud of you. Don't twist our words." Gaslighting. I didn't have that word then, but I felt it sting. My heart pounded as if I were the one being unreasonable, even though every instinct screamed otherwise. I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. So I nodded slowly, sweeping up the broken dish, pretending their words hadn't carved into me. The next few days, I forced myself back into normalcy. I bought curtains, arranged my books on the shelves, planted daisies in the garden. I told myself I had imagined everything, that I should just enjoy what I had built. But doubt lingered like a shadow in every room. Then came the moment I could not ignore. One evening, scrolling through Instagram, I saw Amanda's story. A picture of my front porch, my house lit by the sunset. The caption read, "So excited for our new home, big enough for the whole family." My throat went dry. My fingers trembled as I stared at the screen. She hadn't said visit. She hadn't said celebrate Elena's house. She had said our new home. I sat in silence for a long time, the glow of the phone screen casting shadows across the walls. My parents had denied it. They had laughed it off. But Amanda had just confirmed what I feared. They weren't joking. The house that I thought was mine alone was already being claimed, and deep down, I knew the battle had only just begun. The days after Amanda's Instagram post became a slow unraveling. My parents visited often, always under the guise of helping me settle in, but each conversation carried an undercurrent I could no longer ignore. One morning, as I was arranging books in the study, my mother walked through the doorway without knocking. "You know, Amanda has always been so generous," she began casually. "She gave up her own career for the kids. She sacrifices so much. Not everyone is willing to do that." The implication was sharp. I set a book down and asked, "Are you saying I don't sacrifice?" My father, who had followed her in, chuckled. "You have your house now. Your sister is still renting. She's always been the one who gives without complaint. Maybe you could learn a little from her?" The words hung heavy. No matter how hard I worked, no matter what I built, they found a way to diminish it. I wanted to defend myself, to shout that I had given up nearly a decade of my life, but the weight of their judgment pressed me into silence. At Sunday dinner, the message spread wider. My uncle leaned across the table, his voice dripping with disapproval. "In our family, we look out for each other. A good daughter would welcome her sister under her roof. What's the point of having space if you can't share it?" My aunt nodded. "Exactly. When our parents were alive, we would never have dreamed of saying no to family. Sacrifice is what proves love." Forks scraped against plates, but no one defended me. I sat at the table tasting nothing, the food turning to ash in my mouth. Every eye seemed to weigh me down, casting me as selfish, ungrateful, heartless. The isolation deepened. Friends I had known for years grew distant, echoing the same lines they heard from my parents. "Family is everything. Why are you being so stubborn?" Then, one night, as I sat alone in the living room scrolling through my phone, a message from my best friend lit up the screen. "Lena, be honest with me. Does the deed really only have your name on it?" My chest tightened. If even she doubted me, what did I have left? The next week, everything escalated. I returned from work one evening to find Amanda in my living room. She was lounging on the sofa, her children running through the hallway, giggling as they opened doors to explore. "Amanda!" My voice cracked. "What are you doing here?" She smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Mom gave me the keys. I just wanted to see how the furniture would fit. The kids love it already." I stared at her, the words refusing to form. She stood and walked toward the dining room, tracing the edge of the table with her fingertips as though she owned it. "You know, this space could really work for us," she said, her voice calm, confident, unbothered. "You'll still have your room upstairs. We won't bother you." I wanted to scream, to snatch the keys back from her hand, but shock pinned me in place. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a plan my parents had already set in motion. When Amanda finally left, the silence of the house pressed in on me, louder than her children's laughter had been. I went into the kitchen for water, but as I pulled open the drawer where I kept important papers, my eyes froze on a manila folder I didn't recognize. Inside were loan documents, bank paperwork with my name typed neatly across the top. My pulse raced as I flipped through the pages. At the bottom of one sheet, a signature sprawled in ink. My name. But the handwriting wasn't mine. The room spun. The air seemed to thin. Not only had they invaded my home, but they were invading my very identity. I clutched the folder, my hands trembling, the words blurring before my eyes. And in that moment, a truth crystallized so painfully I could hardly breathe. I wasn't just being pressured to give up my house. I was being sacrificed, turned into the scapegoat for my family's survival. The unraveling came swiftly, like a storm that had been building just beyond the horizon. One morning, my phone buzzed with a string of notifications. A cousin had forwarded me screenshots from the family group chat I was no longer part of. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages. Amanda had written, "Only a few more weeks until we move into the new house. The kids are already picking out their rooms." Dozens of heart emojis followed, along with comments from uncles, aunts, and cousins congratulating her on finally having stability. My throat tightened. My house, my sacrifices. Yet here they were celebrating Amanda as if she had built it all. I drove to my parents' home that evening, anger burning hot in my chest. "How could you let her say that?" I demanded the moment I walked through the door. My father didn't flinch. "Because it's true. You have space. Your sister needs it." "This is my house," I snapped. "I worked for it. I paid for it." "You're being selfish," my mother said calmly, as though the word was fact, not accusation. "Blood is thicker than water. Family comes first. A good daughter would know that." The room seemed to tilt. I stared at the two people who had raised me, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. In their eyes, I wasn't a daughter. Not really. I was a resource, a tool to be used. Something broke inside me. I realized in that moment that their love had always been conditional. Their affection existed only when I gave, when I served, when I sacrificed. It was never about me. It was about what I could provide. I drove home in silence, the headlights slicing through the darkness. Every memory replayed in my head, birthdays overshadowed by Amanda's needs, achievements dismissed as luck, sacrifices ignored. The puzzle pieces snapped into place, and the picture they formed was unbearable. At home, I stumbled into the study and pulled open the drawer where I had found the manila folder. I sifted through every document, searching desperately for clarity. That was when I found it. Legal paperwork, contracts with my name on them, attached to debts I had never taken. My parents had co-signed loans in my name years ago. I dropped into the chair, my hands covering my face. They hadn't just planned to take my house. They had already been using me for years, quietly tying me to obligations I never agreed to. My entire life had been entangled in a web I hadn't even seen. The weight of betrayal crushed me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Nights stretched long and suffocating, haunted by questions I couldn't silence. Am I the selfish one? Am I ungrateful? I whispered those questions to myself in the dark, clutching a pillow until dawn. My body ached from exhaustion, my mind fraying at the edges. My friends pulled away too. One by one, they stopped returning calls, their loyalty to my parents stronger than their friendship to me. "Your mom said you won't help the family," one text read. "I can't believe you're abandoning them." The words stabbed deeper than I expected. Isolation closed in. I was alone in the very house I had dreamed of filling with peace. Now it felt like a cage, every wall closing in tighter. One night, unable to sleep, I sat in the living room with only the hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. The lights were off, the house dark, the shadows heavy. I imagined myself walking out the front door and never coming back, leaving the mortgage, the memories, the pain, all of it behind. A part of me wondered if disappearing might be easier than fighting. The stillness was interrupted by the sharp ping of my phone. A new message lit up the screen from an unknown number. My breath caught as I read the words. "They've done this before, to your uncle. He lost everything." My heart pounded, a fresh wave of dread washing over me. It wasn't just me. This was a pattern, a history, and if I didn't stop it, I knew exactly where my story would end. The message from the unknown number kept me awake until dawn. I stared at the words again and again, each repetition burning deeper. "They've done this before, to your uncle. He lost everything." It felt like the missing puzzle piece in a story I had been too blind or too desperate to see. My parents' betrayal wasn't an accident. It was a pattern, a cycle. I was their latest scapegoat, but I didn't have to be their victim. Desperate for answers, I searched online late into the night, stumbling into forums with titles like "Children of Narcissists and Toxic Parent Survivors." Post after post echoed my own experience. Favoritism, manipulation, gaslighting, financial exploitation. Strangers across the country were describing my life in detail, as though they had lived in my house, sat at my family's dinner table. I read until tears blurred the screen. Every memory I'd buried resurfaced with brutal clarity. The birthday parties where Amanda's gifts were always bigger. The graduations where my parents praised her loudly while dismissing mine as no big deal. The countless times I had been told to be quiet, to sacrifice, to disappear. It wasn't selfishness. It wasn't ingratitude. It was survival. For the first time in months, I felt something crackle in my chest. Not despair, but anger. A righteous, pulsing fury that spread through my veins. I had been gaslit into believing I was the problem, but the truth was clearer than ever. I was the scapegoat in a family that thrived on using me. My resolve solidified, but before I could close my laptop, a notification popped up. A direct message from someone in the group. "I'm a distant relative. I know your parents' secret. We should talk." I froze, rereading the words. Who were they? What did they know? My heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Another crack in the facade. Another secret waiting to explode. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I opened the drawer again, pulling out every paper I had collected. I began cataloging it all. The forged signatures, the suspicious loan documents, screenshots of messages where my parents and Amanda openly discussed sharing my house as if I were invisible. I bought a small recording device and kept it in my purse. Every conversation with them, every slip of the tongue, I captured. I installed security cameras around the house, ensuring that if they entered again without permission, I would have proof. For once, I wasn't just reacting, I was preparing. But preparation also meant facing the truth legally. I scheduled an appointment with a lawyer, a man recommended in one of the survivor groups. Sitting across from him in his neat office, I spread the documents across his desk. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through each page. "These are serious," he said finally. "Forgery, fraud, coercion. If they attempt this again, you have grounds to sue. Strong grounds." My chest tightened. "So I'm not crazy?" He looked at me squarely. "No, they are exploiting you, and if they sign anything else in your name, you could win in court." The words hit me like oxygen after drowning. For the first time, someone validated what I knew but had been too afraid to claim. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. That night, I allowed myself a pause. My best friend, the only one who hadn't abandoned me, came over with takeout. We sat on the back porch, eating lo mein from paper boxes, watching the sun sink behind the trees. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. A small, cracked laugh, but real. "I feel like I've been living in a nightmare," I admitted. Like everyone around me had the script, and I was the only one who didn't know the lines. She reached over, squeezing my hand. "You don't need their approval anymore, Lena. You never did. You just need to protect yourself now." Her words softened something in me. I wasn't alone. Not completely. Later, as I cleaned up the empty boxes, my phone buzzed again. A message from my lawyer, crisp and direct. "If they forge your signature one more time, you can sue, and you will win." I stared at the text, my pulse quickening. The battle wasn't over, it was only beginning, but for the first time, I wasn't terrified. I was ready. I knew the confrontation couldn't be delayed any longer. Every nerve in my body was taut with anticipation as I prepared the living room for the meeting. I had invited them over, my parents and Amanda, for what I called a final discussion. But in truth, it was my declaration of war. They arrived together, my mother already scowling, my father bristling with authority, Amanda trailing behind with swollen, watery eyes she could summon at will. I stood near the fireplace, the deed to the house in my hand. "This ends tonight," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "From this day forward, no one steps foot into this house without my permission. Not you, not Amanda, not anyone. This is my home. Do you understand?" Amanda burst into tears on cue, pressing her hand to her chest. "How could you say that? We're family. The kids need stability. I thought you loved them." "You'll destroy your own bloodline over a house?" my father roared. "Selfish, ungrateful child." "You've always been cold," my mother added, her voice sharp with venom. Amanda sacrifices everything, and you hoard what you have." I took a slow breath and laid the deed flat on the table. "This house is mine. I worked for it. I bled for it, and you will not take it from me." They shouted, cursed, hurled accusations until their voices grew hoarse. I didn't waver. I told them the locks were being changed the next morning. I told them I had spoken to a lawyer that trespassing or forgery would land them in court. And then, for the first time in my life, I walked out of the room before they could get the last word. The next day, I followed through. Every lock replaced, every spare key destroyed. My phone rang incessantly, but I blocked each call. I fortified myself with legal protections, documents filed, warnings prepared. For the first time, I felt the house breathe with me, not against me. But peace was short-lived. By evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. A Facebook post from my mother, plastered across the community page. "It breaks my heart to say this, but our daughter Elena has abandoned us. She refuses to help her sister and the children. After all we've done for her, she has turned her back on family. Pray for us in this time of betrayal." The comments flooded in. Neighbors I'd known since childhood chimed in. "How could she? That poor sister and those little kids. Ungrateful brat." I stared at the screen, fury and humiliation warring inside me. The narrative had been flipped. I was now the villain in the story they were spinning. But I didn't delete the post. Instead, I posted my own. Screenshots of the group chat where Amanda boasted about moving into my house. Photos of the forged loan documents. Voice recordings of my parents belittling me, pressuring me. At first, the reactions were disbelief. Then the tide shifted. Comments appeared. "Wait, if this is true. Those documents look serious. Maybe Elena isn't the bad one here." By the next day, Amanda's family was unraveling. With no promise of shelter, she and her husband scrambled for alternatives. My parents, panicked, turned on her. I overheard through mutual relatives that my father shouted at Amanda, "If you hadn't bragged online, none of this would have blown up." Their perfect facade cracked. The united family image shattered. The community, once quick to condemn me, began whispering about them instead. The sympathy they had tried to harvest soured into suspicion. And yet, even as their world fractured, I felt no victory. Only exhaustion, like a soldier who has survived the battlefield but carries the scars in silence. That night, as I sat by the window, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Elena?" A man's voice, low and urgent. "This is your neighbor, Mr. Dalton. I think you should know. Something big is about to happen with your parents, and you need to be ready." The line went silent. My heart pounded as I clutched the phone, staring into the darkness beyond my window. Whatever storm was coming, it wasn't over yet. The days that followed felt like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. My parents, once pillars of respect in the community, became subjects of whispers and pointed stares. The Facebook post that was supposed to paint me as the traitor had backfired. Neighbors now spoke of forgery, of manipulation, of the ugliness behind their polished smiles. My mother stopped attending church luncheons. My father stopped waving at people from the porch. Their faces, once proud and commanding, were now masks of shame. Amanda's situation grew even more desperate. Without the promise of my house, she and her husband scrambled for a rental they couldn't afford. Arguments between them spilled into the open. Neighbors overheard shouting matches late at night. Her carefully curated social media presence went silent. The cousins who once cheered her on in group chats now avoided her calls. The family that had rallied around her had begun to fracture under the weight of truth. And me? For the first time, I felt strangely calm. I hadn't swung fists or screamed obscenities. I hadn't burned bridges with fire and fury. I had simply held up the mirror and let everyone see the reflection. Truth and evidence had done what anger never could. I spent evenings in my own home now, windows open, the air finally clean. I sat with tea on the porch, listening to crickets instead of chaos. The war wasn't won with violence. It was won with clarity. I hadn't needed to destroy them. They had destroyed themselves. But just as I began to breathe freely, another message arrived. this time from the same distant relative who had first reached out in the online group. They've done this before, not just to your uncle. There were others, cousins, even neighbors. Every time they found someone to exploit, someone to bleed dry until nothing was left. You aren't their first scapegoat. You're just the first who fought back. I stared at the words, the enormity of it settling over me. My parents hadn't simply wronged me. They had lived their lives repeating this cycle, using and discarding, all while cloaking themselves in the language of love and sacrifice. For a moment, anger surged again, but then it ebbed into something else: resolve. Their story would not define mine. I began to rebuild, not the house. I already had that, but myself. I joined a support group in person this time, not just online. Faces greeted me with understanding, strangers who spoke my pain before I even told them my story. In their company, I realized I didn't need blood ties to feel belonging. I could create my own family, chosen not by birth, but by trust. With each meeting, I felt stronger. The guilt that had shackled me loosened. I wasn't a selfish daughter. I wasn't ungrateful. I was a survivor of a toxic system, and now I was free. I started sharing my story more openly, first in the group, then on social media. Messages poured in from others who had been through the same, thanking me for putting words to their silent suffering. Some told me I had given them courage to set boundaries of their own. That, more than anything, healed me. My pain had been transformed into purpose. One evening, I invited a few friends from the group over. We sat in my living room, the same space where Amanda once measured furniture as if it were hers, but now it rang with laughter, warmth, belonging. My home had finally become what I wanted it to be: safe, mine, and shared only with those who respected it. As dawn broke one quiet morning, I stepped onto the porch with a cup of coffee. The sky was painted with streaks of pink and gold, the first light spilling over the neighborhood. I sat on the steps feeling the warmth of the rising sun. This house was more than brick and wood. It was my sanctuary, my proof that I could rise from ashes. The betrayal had nearly broken me, but it had also rebuilt me into someone stronger, wiser, unshakable. The past would always whisper, but it no longer chained me. And as the sun climbed higher, I knew my story wasn't just survival, it was rebirth.